In the brutal silence of the savannah, a tiny life was fading. Abandoned in the dust, a baby macaque waited for an end that seemed certain, until the earth itself began to tremble. Out of the heat haze emerged Hathi, an ancient colossus with a heart as massive as his frame. Stay tuned as we witness an encounter that defies the laws of nature, the moment a 5-ton titan becomes the only hope for a creature no larger than a cluster of figures. Chapter 1: The Hollow of Abandonment. The savannah was a vast, shimmering sea of amber and gold, where the heat haze danced like restless spirits above the cracked and thirsty earth. It was a landscape that felt as old as time itself, where the sun ruled with a tyrannical brilliance, bleaching the life out of anything that dared to stand still. Under this relentless glare, the shadows of the scattered acacia trees were the only sanctuary left for the weary. In the hollow of a skeletal baobab tree, a tiny, shivering bundle of charcoal fur lay forgotten, a baby macaque no larger than a cluster of overripe figures. His mother had been swept away in the sudden, violent chaos of a passing predator's hunt, a frantic blur of tawny fur and sharp teeth that had left the infant behind in the dust. Now, he was alone in a world that favored the swift and the strong. The infant's cries were small, fragile things, like the snapping of dry twigs underfoot, easily swallowed by the immense and indifferent silence of the plains. Each breath he took was a struggle against the dust that clogged his nostrils and the dehydration that made his throat feel like it was lined with sandpaper. He huddled against the rough bark of the tree, seeking a warmth that the deadwood could not provide. High above, a vulture circled in the bruised blue sky, its keen eyes fixed on the small, unmoving shape. The bird of prey knew the mathematics of the savannah all too well. It was waiting for the final flicker of life to go out. The macaque, however, was too exhausted to fear the shadow crossing over him, his small heart beating a frantic, uneven rhythm against the cold ground. It seemed that the story of this tiny life would be a short one, a mere footnote in the brutal history of the wilderness. The silence of the plains felt heavy, like a velvet shroud being drawn over the hollow. But the savannah, for all its cruelty, is also a place of sudden and inexplicable grace, and the wind was about to carry a scent that would change everything. Chapter 2: The Coming of the Grey Mountain. The ground began to tremble, a low, rhythmic thrumming that felt like the very heartbeat of the world rising up through the soles of the earth. At first, it was barely a whisper, a vibration that unsettled the pebbles and sent a shiver through the dry grass. But as the seconds passed, the vibration grew into a steady, resonant pulse that signaled the approach of something truly immense. From the shimmering horizon emerged a silhouette so gargantuan it seemed to dwarf the sun itself, a moving fortress of flesh and bone. Hathi, an ancient bull elephant with skin the color of a gathering thundercloud, moved with a slow, deliberate majesty. He was a creature of deep and unyielding memory, carrying within his massive skull the maps of every hidden spring and the echoes of every season he had survived. His tusks were like curved ivory scimitars, scarred by decades of clearing paths and defending the herd, yet he carried them with a regal ease. Each step he took was a testament to his power, his tree-trunk legs crushing the dry earth with a force that could have leveled a small forest. Yet, for all his size, there was a strange, silent grace to his movement, a fluid dignity that commanded the respect of the entire plains. His trunk, a marvel of nearly 100,000 muscles, swayed like a pendulum of grey velvet, searching the air for the subtle sense of the living. Hathi was not merely walking, he was listening to the world through his feet and his nose, cataloguing the stories of the savannah as he passed. He was the witness of the plains, the silent observer who saw the things that the smaller, faster creatures missed. As he neared the skeletal baobab, Hathi's pace slowed, his massive head tilting as if he had heard a sound that didn't belong in the natural chorus of the wind. The vulture above took flight, intimidated by the sheer presence of the titan. Hathi came to a halt, a mountain of grey muscle that stood between the dying infant and the burning sun, his shadow falling over the hollow like a cool, protective blanket. Chapter 3: The Delicate Inquiry. Hathi stood perfectly still, the dust settling around his massive feet like a silver shroud in the fading light. He looked down at the tiny, gasping creature in the dirt, his eyes, deep, amber orbs of ancient wisdom, softening with a sudden, unexpected tenderness. There was a profound silence in that moment, a stillness that seemed to pause the very laws of the wild. The macaque looked up, his small, dark eyes reflecting the towering wall of grey muscle that now loomed over him. To the infant, Hathi must have appeared as a god of the earth, a being so vast that its scale was beyond comprehension. The contrast was impossible, the titan of the world standing over a fragment of life that could be crushed by a single, accidental step. With a gentleness that defied his immense power, Hathi extended his trunk toward the hollow. The tip, sensitive enough to pick up a single blade of grass, brushed against the infant's charcoal fur with the lightness of a falling leaf. It was a touch of pure inquiry, a silent question asked in the language of the skin, checking for the warmth of life amidst the cold shadows of the baobab. The infant didn't flinch, instead, he let out a tiny, raspy chirp, a sound of recognition that reached something deep within the elephant's ancient heart. Hathi let out a soft, huffing breath, a warm gust of air that smelled of wild herbs and distant water. Stopped. He was no longer a victim of the plains, he was a guest of the colossus, riding high above the dangers that had nearly claimed him in the hollow below. Hathi let out a low, vibrating rumble that started in his chest and traveled through his entire frame, a sound of contentment that the macaque felt in his very marrow. It was a lullaby for the lost, a vibration that promised that as long as the mountain walked, the foundling would not fall. With his new companion secured, the ancient bull turned his gaze back toward the horizon. Chapter 5: The March of the Guardians. The journey across the plains began anew, but Hathi's stride had undergone a subtle, profound change. It was no longer just the weary march of a solitary traveler seeking the next watering hole, it was the steady, protective pace of a guardian carrying a precious cargo. Every step was calculated to be smooth, his massive knees absorbing the shock of the uneven ground to keep the infant stable. They moved across the savannah as a single, improbable unit, the grey mountain and its tiny, dark shadow. The heat of the day began to break, the sky turning the color of a bruised plum as the sun dipped toward the edge of the world. As they walked, the other denizens of the plains, the watchful cheetahs in the grass and the skittish gazelles, watched in hushed awe as the giant passed. It was a sight that defied the brutal, unyielding mathematics of the wild, a creature of such absolute strength choosing to shield a creature of such absolute fragility. The usual hierarchy of the savannah felt momentarily irrelevant in the face of this partnership. Hathi walked past a pride of lions, his tusks gleaming in the twilight, and even the kings of the grass gave him a wide and respectful berth. The macaque, now recovered enough to be curious, peered out from behind the massive ear, watching the world slide by from a height he had never imagined. He saw the tops of the acacia trees and the distant shimmer of the great river, things that his kind usually only saw from the safety of the highest branches. But here, he was safer than he had ever been in any tree, anchored to the strongest living thing on the continent. As the stars began to pierce the velvet canopy of the night, Hathi didn't stop. He pushed forward with a focused intent, his memory guiding him toward a specific grove of fruiting trees where he knew the macaque's kin often gathered. He was a creature of duty now, a bridge between a tragedy and a new beginning, walking with a purpose that made the very air around him feel charged with a quiet power. Chapter 6: The Legacy of the Titan. As the moon rose, casting a pale, ghostly light over the whispering grass, Hathi finally arrived at a lush grove where the air was sweet with the scent of ripening marula fruit. High in the branches, he could hear the chattering of a troop of macaques, their voices a sharp contrast to the deep silence of the trek. He came to a halt under the widest canopy, his presence a silent command for the trees to be still. With the same infinite care he had used to lift the infant, Hathi lowered his trunk, allowing the macaque to crawl down from his neck. He extended his trunk toward a low-hanging branch, providing a bridge of grey muscle for the foundling to cross. The infant hesitated for a heartbeat, looking back at the giant who had saved him, before leaping onto the familiar safety of the wood. The troop above fell silent as they realized one of their own had been returned from the threshold of the abyss. A female macaque dropped down to the lower branch, her eyes wide with wonder, and gathered the shivering infant into her arms. The boy was reclaimed by his own kind, a miracle delivered by the very earth itself, his scent now mingled with the ancient smell of the elephant. Hathi watched the reunion for a moment, his amber eyes reflecting the silver moonlight. He let out a final, low, trumpeting rumble, a sound that vibrated in the marrow of the trees and signaled his departure. He didn't wait for gratitude, he was a king who understood that the reward for his service was the survival of the small. He turned his massive body back toward the open plains. He walked on into the night, a solitary titan disappearing into the mist of the savannah. The macaques in the trees would tell the story of the grey mountain for generations, a legend of the day a colossus became a cradle. Hathi walked with his head held high, knowing that the smallest life is often the greatest burden, and the greatest honor of the strong. Hathi didn't walk away, and neither should we. If this story of ancient mercy moved you, help us share the beauty of the wild by hitting that subscribe button and ringing the bell. We tell the stories the world needs to hear, one rescue at a time. Don't miss a single miracle.